This is Gemara in Kesubos Daf Chof Tes as we embark on a new parak, the third parak of this fabulous Masechta. Let's get straight, headstrong into the new parak. Says the Mishnah, Elu Nairos. These are the Nairos, and what is a Naira? Rashi right off the bat speaks out that a Naira is a woman, is a girl that brings to Cyrus, brings to pubic hair, shows her simone gadlus that she's a gadol ad Sheti Balger until she becomes 12 and a half years old. And Rashi explains this is 6 months from a 12 to 12 and a half year old. And that is a Naira, this intermediary stage of a woman before she becomes a Gedaila. And Rashi speaks out that that's where this din of Kanas, as we'll see in a moment. What are we referring to? Referring to a woman who was unfortunately violated. Someone raped this woman, as the next Rashi teaches us in Ansa Adam. Says the Mishnah, Sheishlan Kanas. When do they get this Kanas? If a man forces them to have relations, a man rapes them, is ma'anis them. What is the halacha? Back into Rashi and third line. You have to pay your father 50 silver coins. Chamishin kesef, as the pasuk says, that's what you have to pay her. So that's the Mishnah, that's the headline. That's going to be the discussion of the beginning of this parak. When you pay this kanas, this fine for violating this young Jewish girl, this girl between the age of 12 and 12 and a half, of 50 silver kesef, is when she is a naira. Now the Mishnah continues, these three people, if she is either a mamzeres, a nesina, or a kusis, which we'll see what each one means, Rashi quickly speaks out that a nesina is from the Givainim. This was the big shayla, whether they were indeed good geirim or not, whether they were only geiri arayisim or not. Excuse me, that's the next one. That's the nesinim, is in the time of David HaMelech, the people who used to draw water and cut wood. And the kusim, Rashi says, that's the shayla, whether they were appropriate geirim or not. They only did it under duress. But if someone violates any one of these three girls, you have to pay the 50 silver coins. Similarly, the Mishnah continues, if someone violates a geiris woman that converted a captive, a shivcha, or a maid servant sheniftu that was redeemed, vishenis gairu, or converted vishenis dachru was freed, less than 3 years and 1 age, a young girl, that she, again, not that she's less than 3 years, but she was freed when she was less than 3 years old, as we've learned in the previous parakim, which means that she's a basula, that her basulim come back until she's 3 years old. So if someone violates any of these women, you have to pay the 50 silver coins. And similarly continues the Mishnah, and this is a third category, someone violates his sister, his aunt, his father's sister, his aunt from his mother, his sister-in-law, his wife's sister. Yeah, we'll just say it that way. Or his brother's wife, Elisha's achi aviv, his father's brother's wife, Anida, all Anida, Yeshem Kanas, all of these women, if one violates, forces them to have relations, you have to pay the Kanas. And the Mishnah concludes with a statement that we're going to explain, Afal Bishain Bi Kares. Even though if you violate these girls, you get kares, you get killed by a heavenly decree, as we learned it back in Mesechtas Ma'ikain, refers to someone who dies either immediately or someone between the age of 50 and 60. Ein bahen misas adazin. So even though they get kares, al bishain bekares, still, since it's not misa bezin, what's the Mishnah pointing out? Therefore, you have a payment. We know there's generally a rule of Kimle B'di Rabba Binei, that any time one is Chayav Misa, they don't have to pay a payment to the Kanas, the fine. Says the Mishnah, in this case, since the death penalty is not B'dei Adam, rather it's in the hands of heaven, therefore there is a payment of 50 silver coins. And the Gemara right away comes along, and the Gemara jumps in and says, Hani Nairis B'sulais, these Nairis, these young 12 to 12 and a half year old girls that are Mamzeres and Nesina, etc., Islu Kanas Kesheris Loi. The Mishnah sounds like the only time you pay this Kanas that we learned from the pasuk of the Torah of Nas Navi and Naira, that if someone violates and forces this young girl, this 12 to 12 and a half year girl, to have relations, it sounds like the only time you have to pay is when? It's the cases of the Mishnah, when they're possible. It sounds like, but if they're kosher, you don't have to pay. What would the svara in that be? Answers the Gemara, no, Achikam is what the Mishnah means. Elu Nairis Psulai Sheishlam Kanas. These are the cases of a woman who is puzzled, is not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael, and yet she receives a Kanas, her father receives the Kanas. If one violates her, what are the cases? That's part one of the Mishnah, that it's not particularly only these cases, it's any girl. But the Chiddush is But these girls have a special chiddush that even though they're puzzle, they still receive the kanas. And the second diuk of the Mishnah is, maybe one would have thought this is the first diuk, that's the second word of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said naira, as we explained in the Tab Rashi, that the naira is referring to this girl from the age of 12 to 12 and a half. This woman, right before she becomes a Gedailah, says the Gemara, naira ain't ketana loy. The Mishnah sounds like this din is a din specifically about a naira. But a ketana, a girl less than 12 years old, does not receive the kanas. Explains the Gemara, Mantana, who is the Tana? Who is the opinion of the Mishnah that says that a Tana would not receive a kanas? Am Rav Yehuda, Am Rav? Rabbi Meir, this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Tanya, as we learned in a Raisa, Ketana mibas yom echad va'ad shetavi shtei cyrus. A girl from birth until she brings shtei cyrus, yesh lo mecher. Her father is allowed to sell her, as Rashi points out. Her father has the schus to sell her as a maid servant. Ve'ein lo kanas. However, she does not get the fine, even if she is violated the fine of Chamishim Kesef, 50 silver coins. She does not receive from the age of birth until 12, until she brings Shtei Cyrus. But Mishatevi Shtei Cyrus Vashati Bagar, which is the age of Naira, from the time she brings two pubic hairs, from the time she becomes a Gedailah until she becomes a full-fledged Gedailah, from the age of 12 to 12 and a half, then Yesh Kanas, then her father gets this fine if someone violates her. However, Vein Lamecher, he loses the right to sell her. So when she's very young, he could sell her, but he does not get the fine. From 12 to 12 and a half, he gets the fine, but he cannot sell her. Divrei Rabbi Meir. And that's going to be the opinion of the Mishnah. The Mishnah, what said specifically, a naira is Rabbi Meir, because according to Rameir, it's only the naira, but the ketana would not get such a fine. Now, where do we see this? Rameir would say, "Kol makam sheish mecher ein knas. Kol makam sheish knas ein mecher." You have a seesaw going on over here that when you're allowed to sell this young girl, you don't get paid if she's violated. When you get paid if she's violated, you're not allowed to sell her. That is the opinion of Rameir. And the chachamim oimrim no ketana mi ba'sholish an yomecher ad shetibager, from 3 until 12 and a half. Yesh lo kanas. She gets the kanas. So the Mishnah is clearly not the Chachamim. As the Mishnah said, the Naira and the Chachamim said that even a ketana gets a kanas if she is violated. But I asked the Gemara on this last sheet of the Chachamim, kanas in mecher loi. The Mishnah, the price that we just quoted, sounds like the young girl gets a kanas, but it sounds like the father not let her sell her. Answers the Gemara, Ema, no, you have to read the price as we turn over to Chavtezim Abeis. Af Kanas b'makay mecher, that even at a time that you're allowed to sell her, meaning she is a ketana, she's a young girl that the father has the right to sell her into slavery, even at that time, if she is violated, the father would receive payment, receive the fine. Asks the Gemara of Hani b'nei Kasa Ninu, are these girls eligible to get a kanas? V'amai? What's the reason? Ikri kan v'loi tiel isha. Isha ru'uyaloi. Ask the Gemara on the Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? We just said that there's a fine, there's a kanas, even a woman who's not roi, even a woman who's not fit to join Klal Yisrael, Mazeris and Esina, etc. But says the Gemara, why? We should learn for the pasuk of v'loi and to him tiel isha, that the din should be that there's only a kanas if she is an isha haru'uyaloi. If she's a woman, you're allowed to marry. And the Mamzeres Nesina in Kusis, you're not allowed to marry. Akasha on the Mishnah. Multiple answers. Says the Gemara Chavtesim at Beis, 2 lines down. Shlokish answer number 1. Naira, Hanaira. We have 3 different psukim. Chad, one word of Naira is Ligufei. Teaches the din itself that if someone violates a Naira, you have to pay. You even have to pay if the woman is one that you're not allowed to marry under the Isser of a Deraisa Chayve Lavin that the Torah says, do not marry her, Mamzeres, etc. When it's a kares to marry her. That is Rish Lakish's answer. Rapapa Amar Besula Besula Besula. Different drush. It says the word Besula 3 times. Chal Gufei. You have a machlokes, a classical Gemara. Machlokes Rish Lakish and Rapapa. What is the source? That there's even a kanas for chayve lavin, chayve krisus. There's even a kanas for mamzeres nesina, etc. And it's not only a woman of the isha. It's not only a woman that you're able to marry. What is the source? Rish Lakish says naira, and Rapapa says besula, besula. And now, of course, in the classical game of Gemara ping pong, Rish Lakish versus Rapapa, we throw the ball back and forth. For Rapapa, ask the Gemara 8 lines down. Chavtesim and Beis. My time, Rish Lakish. Why does Rapapa not see the drush of naira, naira, naira. Answers Rav Papa, we need that for a different din. What din? The din of Abaya. Damar Abaya taught us Baal Leha Umeisa. What is the halacha? If someone violates a girl and then she is nifter before they bring the perpetrator, before they bring him to Bezdin, Potter, he's going to be exempt from payment. Why? Because here's the cause of Shenemar v'Nasan la'avia naira. And that's what Rav Papa is doing with this naira of Reish Lakish, that Rav Papa says it is you give it to the father. La'avia naira v'loy la'avi meisa, teaching us only the father of the naira and not the father of the Mesa, and therefore that's the special din that Rav Papa learns out from the pasuk of Reish Lakish. And now throwing the ball back, Reish Lakish might tell Rav Papa, why doesn't Reish Lakish learn it out from Besula like Rav Papa? Answers Reish Lakish we need it for a different din. The Tanya says in a price of Kesav Yishkal Kemayar HaBesulais, it says that if someone is mefata, someone seduces a girl, what does he have to pay? To pay silver shekel, like Kemayar HaBesulais, like the payment of a Besula. And we learn out from this pasuk Shezeh Kemayar Besulais and Besulais Kizeh, that each one is like each other. A special din teaching us that the mefata that someone seduces has to pay the same payment, and that is how Rav Papa used the pasuk of Reish Lakish of Besulais, and that is the reason. Actually, that's how Reish Lakish learns the pasuk of Rav Papa of Besulais ha Besula. And ask the Gemara of Reish Lakish, Nami Bailech Labaya. But 1 second, what does Reish Lakish do with this din of Abaya? This din that's only when the woman is alive, but not paying Lavia Naira. Rav Papa Nami Bailech Gzeir Shava. And what does Rav Papa do with this Gzeir Shava of Kesi Yeshua Gemara Besulais, a special din of Mifata? Says the Gemara, a very interesting answer. Elushita Kraik Sivi. In the pasuk in the Torah, there are 6 extra mentions. This naira, 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 as the Gemara says, naira, 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 and then there's besula, besula, zabesula. So these 6 words in the Torah. Now Reish Lakish and Rav Papa become one cholent together. Trey, 2 of these psukim are ligufa, ayu v'chad la'abai v'chad l'gzeir shava. He asked you, Trey, we have 2 psukim left over. V'chad l'sui chayve lam, v'chad l'sui chayve krisus. So says the Gemara, Papa and Reish Lakish get together to make one long and lengthy drasha. Instead of Reish Lakish learning it from Naira, 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 and Papa learning from Besula, 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 rather, they take, let's come together. Let's make one big challenge. We have 6 words, and from these 6 words, we can learn out all the dinim, all the dinim that are necessary. But points out the Gemara about 20 lines from the bottom of the Amud, Chav Testament base. First word line is krisus. Ulafuke mehaitan. And our Mishnah, when our Mishnah says that if someone is ma'anis, if someone violates, if someone forcefully lives with any one of these women, that there's a special halacha by the mamzeres, by the sister, etc., you have to pay the fine la'avia naira. That halacha is not like the following time. Ulafuke mehaitan. Our Mishnah is not like this. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa. Veloiti Elisha. The Brisa says that if someone is ma'anis, if someone forcibly lives with a woman, Allah is he has to marry her. To him, he should be a wife. And from here we learn out Shimon Ateimani Omer Isha Sheyesh B'Havaya. That what does it mean? From here we learn out that the only time you're going to pay this special fine, this kanas that we're talking about the whole day, this kanas that this parak began, this special fine of chamishim shekel kesef, the fine that one is ma'anis, a girl, is only, says Shimon HaTeimani, if one violates a woman, sheyesh b'havaya, a woman that one is that if one was mekadesh, or if one said areya mekudeshesli to her, the kedushim would take effect. Rav Shimon ben Menasya oimer isha haruya. A very subtle difference. Let's see that clearly. Shimon HaTeimani said, Isha sheyesh b'havaya, a woman in which a kedusha would take effect. Rav Shimon ben Menasya says, no, a woman that you're allowed to stay married to. And what's the difference between these 2 opinions of Shimon HaTeimani? The kedusha will take effect, or a woman that Yishba Aruya L'Kaim will stay married. Amar Rav Zira Mamzeres Unesina. Ika Beinayu, 2 cases in the Mishnah, the case of Mamzeres and Nesina. One is not allowed to marry. That is going to be the difference between these 2 opinions. Because if one marries her, they are married. It's also to marry the Mamzeres and Nesina. But if you did it, the marriage would take effect. So says the Gemara, Laman da Amar, Yesh B'Havaya. According to Shimon HaTeimani, that he learns out from the pasuk that Yesh B'Havaya, that there's only a kanas if one has the possibility of staying married, she Yesh B'Havaya, Hanami Yesh B'Havaya, the Mamzeres and Nesina as well, you would have to give the kanas. Why? because you could stay married to them. But according to the Man Damar, according to Rav Shimon ben Menasya, it doesn't just mean that the Kedushin takes effect. It means you're able to stay married. There would be no Kanas in this case because one is not able to stay married to this woman, meaning it's an interesting din we're seeing. The Kedushin is Chal. If someone says it works, but it's usher to stay married. So according to Shimon HaTeimani, is there Yesh V'Havaya? Would the Kedushin work? The Kedushin would work, so they would get the Kanas. But according to Shimon ben Menasya, are they allowed to stay married? Absolutely not. And therefore there would be no Kanas. But I asked the Gemara, Rav Akiva, according to Rav Akiva, Da'amar, what does Rav Akiva say in Kedushin Taifzim B'chayvei Lahavin? These are tremendous sugyas. Says Rav Akiva, Kedushin does not work if someone is usher to that person B'chayvei Lahavin, if there's a lav. My Beinayu, what is the case? Because according to Rav Akiva, both the Mamzeres and a Nesina, the Kedushin, would not take effect. So answers the Gemara, you know what the difference is. Almana l'kohen gadol karev simai. The case is, would there be, again, we're trying to find out the case of an oinus payment. The case of our Mishnah, the chiddush of our Mishnah, that one pays this 50 shekel. If someone is ma'anis and forces a girl to have relations, so says the Gemara, the nafkamina between Shimon HaTeimani and Rav Shimon ben Menasya, again, who learned out in a subtly different way. The Shimon HaTeimani said sheyish ba'avaya. The Kedushin is chal. Shimon ben Menasya says one is allowed to stay married. The difference is going to be an almana who marries a kohen gadol, which of course is forbidden. Kirav simai. The Tanya learned in a brayso 6 lines to the bottom of the Amid. Rav Simai Omer min hakol oiser Rav Akiva mamzerin. Rav Akiva holds that any child born when the husband and wife are forbidden to each other is called a mamzer. Chutz me'almana l'kohen gadol. There's a special din if the almana married a kohen gadol, even though it is forbidden. Still, shari amra Torah lo yikach ve'lo yichalel. The pasuk says regarding the kohen gadol, lo yikach. Don't take the almana, the widow, for a wife. Ve'lo yichalel, and do not mess up and profane the offsprings, the kids. And from there we learn out chilulim u'aiseh. Kishmak, we learn out from the pasuk that says that the child is chilulim. However, in the middle level over here, that there's not going to be a mamzer created from the almana to the kohen gadol, and therefore what happens are from the fact that there's no mamzerim from this union of the kohen gadol to the almana, we see that the kedushin must have taken effect, even though it is forbidden. So according to Rav Akiva, that normally holds a kedushin types in b'chayvei lavin. But in this case of the almana, the kohen gadol is going to be a unique din. The kedushin will take effect, and for the fact that we see according to Rav Simai that the children will be a chalal and not a mamzer. However, according to Shimon ben Menasya, you're still not allowed to stay married, and therefore there'll be no kanas. Let's just speak this out one more time. According to Shimon HaTeimani, is their kedushin is when the kohen gadol tells the almana harei mikudeshli. Does it work? The answer is yes. Even according to Rav Akiva, who normally holds that kedushin does not work b'chayvei lavin, and this is a lav. It's an isudarais of the kohen gadol to marry the almana. Still, in this is a unique case according to Rav Simai that says the kohen gadol and the almana, the child, will not be a mamzer, but rather a chalol. That means that the kedushin took effect. If the kedushin took effect, according to Shimon HaTeimani, it's an isha sheyesh b'havaya. The kedushin works, so there'll be a kanas if someone violates this woman. But according to Rav Shimon ben Menasya, that isha ru'uya l'kaim, you have to be able to stay married. This union, of course, is forbidden to the almana to the kohen gadol. There will be no kanas. But ask the Gemara further. Rav Yeshayv of the Omer, 3 lines to the bottom. He was very upset with this din of Rav Akiva. He said, come and scream on Akiva ben Yosef, Rav Akiva, because he is saying that anyone who is usher to sleep with, then the halacha is the child is a mamzer. My beinayu, what are you going to say the difference between Shimon HaTeimani and Rav Shimon ben Menasya is? Why? So according to Rav Yeshiva, what's going to happen is going to always be a mamzer. Even the almana l'kohen gadol will result in a mamzer. If the almana l'kohen gadol will result in a mamzer, we're back to square one. That means that the kedushin is not chal between the almana l'kohen gadol. So therefore, even according to Shimon HaTeimani, that says isha sheyesh b'havaya, you just need the kedushin to take effect. But almana l'kohen gadol, the kedushin will not take effect. So Ika Beinayu explains the Gemara as we turn over to tomorrow's daf of Daf Lamed of Aleph. Chayvei aseh mitzri The case is going to be if someone is ma'anes, one who has a positive commandment to not be with them, which is an example of a Mitzri and an Adaimi, as the pasuk says. If you look at Rashi, 2 lines from the top, Dar Shlishi Yaboy Lahem, the third generation of an Egyptian or Adaimi you're allowed to marry, which teaches me that a Dar Sheni, a second generation, you're not allowed to marry. So and that's going to be the case in which the Kedusha will be Chal according to Shimon HaTeimani, and therefore there will be payment, there will be a kanas. Whereas there will be a payment, there will be a kanas. Why? Because it's chayvei say. That's according to Rav Shimon HaTeimani. But according to Shimon Menasya, there will be no kanas. Let's just go one more line. That's all good according to Rav Yeshiva, like we said it a moment ago. Why? Meaning, Rav Yeshiva, who said on the bottom of Amid Beis, they come and scream at Rav Akiva, everyone is a mamzer. That only works if he's coming to argue in Rav Simai. Shapir, it's great. Kasi Shapir. But if Rav Yeshiva is not merely arguing Rav Simai, he's saying his own reasoning. What's going to happen? So to come out that according to Rav Yeshiva, not only is he arguing on Rav Simai, he's arguing on everyone. And he holds that even in a case of Chayv Yaseh, even in a case of Mitzri and Adaimi, even in a case where it's a positive command, the child will still be a mamzer. So where do we have a case of a difference between Shimon HaTeimani and Rav Shimon ben Asiyah? My Beinayu, what this will conclude, the case is going to be a woman who already had relations. If she is together with a Kohen Gadol, that is going to be the case that even Rabbi Yeshiva is going to agree that the child is not a mamzer. Since the child is not a mamzer, the Kedusha will take effect. If the Kedusha will take effect, according to Shimon HaTeimani, it will be a kanas. According to Shimon Menashe, it will not be. And therefore, that's going to be the case. That's going to be the practical difference between Shimon Menashe and Shimon HaTeimani in when the kanas will be applicable for one who violates a girl, will be a case of a ba'ula l'kohen gadol, because even Rabbi Yeshiva will agree that the child will be a mamzer. A bit of a long-winded cheshbin, and to have kohen gadol, ba'ula l'kohen gadol, and we'll start picking up from a Maishana the next year.